Now that we've got a handle on what the business needs and we've got an understanding of what users need, now we have to ask ourselves a very important question before we do anything else, and that is, what's worth doing? Based on what we know, based on all the things that we've heard, based on the initial things that the client has told us about this product, based on our own impressions of what we think is important and isn't important, you have to start to figure out what's worth your time and your effort. I'm going to show you a chart that illustrates the trade-off. On one axis, you have importance, right? How important is it? Any particular feature, function, any particular type of need, you have to weigh all this stuff. What's important? And secondly, what's viable? What's feasible, right? What can we actually pull off in the time that we have allocated to us, with the budget that we have allocated to us, and with the resources, people, right? How big is our team? So how much can we conceivably do, and can we actually tackle some of these things? If things are on the low end of the scale, if it's of low importance, and it's highly unlikely that you can do it with the constraints that you have, then those are things you don't want to spend time with. You don't want to waste time addressing things that aren't important and probably aren't possible. In the next middle area, any efforts that you have in terms of user experience design, making something better, making sure you implement all these features and functions that you deem to be important, you should accommodate them. But it does not mean that the majority of your time is spent making sure that these things are all the best it can be. Why? Because they're not that important to the users, they're not that important to the business, and you've got some doubts as to whether you can pull them off. Okay, so they're kind of in the middle of the scale. Anything that falls in the quadrant of high importance and we absolutely know we can do this, you absolutely have to address those things. Those are your sweet spots. Those are the things that are going to provide real value. It is well worth your time to make sure that those things not only are incorporated, but that they are designed extremely well, that they shine extremely bright in terms of the value that they provide, in terms of delighting people, in terms of sort of acting like an answer to a prayer almost. That's where the majority of your effort should be spent, because that's where you're going to get the most return. The second thing you have to ask yourself is, what are we creating? You have to define what it's going to be exactly. And there's different parts to figuring out what that is. And this is why it's extremely important to talk to all these different groups of people. It's why it's important to talk to stakeholders and all different types of stakeholders. It's why it's important to talk amongst yourselves if you have a project team. It's why it's important to talk to users, okay? Because the client may have one very specific idea in his mind about what this thing is going to be. The project manager may have an entirely different idea, even though, like, okay, in this case, right, I know it's a shape, but to me it's a triangle. To the client, well, yeah, it's still a shape, but it's a square. Then you have you, the developer or the designer, or whatever position you happen to be in. To you, you know it's a shape too, but you sort of envision it more like this because, what the hell? You're the one with all the talent, so you can make it into something really amazing. Okay? So asking these questions and making sure you ask it of every single person involved in the project, you got to make sure everyone's on the same page, because this lack of understanding as to what exactly we are building derails projects very easily. It's why you need a specification of some sort. It's why you need requirements. It's why you have to have a common understanding of what the feature set is. You have to have a common understanding of what the content is, right? And where's it going to come from and who's going to create it. All those types of questions go into defining what it is that you're building. And you want to make absolutely sure you know what you're creating before you move on to any other steps. The third really important question that you have to ask is, what value does it provide? Answering that question starts with asking, who is our target audience? Down to the most specific amount of detail that you can get. In this case, with the image that's on screen right now, you say our target is African American chefs who specialize primarily in baking. They are probably anywhere from 35 to 40 years old, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You're trying to get very, very specific about who this thing is for. From there, you say, okay, well, what experiences are compelling to them? Let's say you're designing a website that's for a blueberry company. And you say, just like milk launched its own marketing campaign, the blueberry industry has a vested interest in this particular audience segment. So we believe that if we were able to provide fresh blueberries in bulk at very competitive prices with the convenience of online one-click shopping, that would be huge. So again, you've defined not only a very specific audience, but you've also defined a very specific experience that is meaningful to them in some way, that they care about. The next question you have to ask is, how is our offering going to be different from competitors? Not only competitors, but substitutes. What about the raspberry industry? Different fruit, I know, but what are they doing? What are they offering these chefs that might make them order raspberries instead of blueberries? These are questions that have to be asked. It all seems very, very simple, but you would be surprised, or not, for those of you who have some experience, you'd be surprised how often a project sort of goes right into design and development without any of this. Unless you know to some reasonable degree what value you're giving people and why it matters to them specifically, you're shooting in the dark, okay? And you're hoping that you hit something. And it's just not a good place to be, even if the end product isn't yours. Because inevitably, when the project launches, when the site launches, and people don't order things from it, and the client becomes unhappy, someone is going to get blamed for that outcome. And I will guarantee you that one of those fingers will be pointed at you. It's not a place you want to be. So make sure you ask all these questions up front in the strategy phase.